My name is Peridot Winslow, and I'm 72 years old. I know, Peridot is a pretty unusual name. My parents really loved minerals, and my dad was a geologist. When I was a kid, I really didn't like my name. The other kids teased me about it.
But I
Got used to it as I grew up. Now, I don't mind it. It's easy to remember, at least. I was born in 1952 in Grand Junction, Colorado. We weren't a rich family, but we were happy. My dad really was a geologist, and my mom worked at the library. They taught me to love being precise and organized. From my dad, I got a knack for math. From my mom, I got a strong attention to detail. After high school, I went to the University of Colorado to study accounting. It's not the most exciting field, I know, but it's dependable. When I was 23, I married Jasper Winslow. He was an engineer, working for a construction company. He was a serious and thorough man, kind of like my father. He always got straight to the point when talking about work. But when I needed him, he was always there to help and protect me. We were together for 34 years. They were good, peaceful years. Jasper built us a house in the suburbs of Denver. It was small but cozy, and I had a garden where I grew tomatoes and roses. I worked as the head accountant for the same construction company as my husband. It wasn't because of him. It just happened that they needed someone with my focus and honesty. We had our only son, Casper, later in life. I was already 31. The doctor said we couldn't have any more children, so Jasper and I really loved him. Maybe we spoiled him too much. I think we did. Jasper would often say, "Peridot, don't make the boy soft. Let him figure things out for himself." But it's hard for a mother to listen to that. Casper was a difficult boy to raise. I wouldn't say he was bad. No, he never did anything really terrible. He never got mixed up with the wrong crowd. But he always seemed a bit unstable, always wanting to find an easy way to get rich. He wasn't a great student, even though he was smart enough. He always said he'd find a way to get rich quick and that working a normal job was for losers. After high school, he started college for business, but he didn't finish. He dropped out in his third year, saying he didn't need the theory, he'd learn it all on the job. Jasper was really upset. He didn't even speak to Casper for a week. And me, like always, I tried to get them to make up, telling my husband that Casper was just trying to find his way. Jasper died suddenly of a heart attack at work 15 years ago. I remember that day like it was yesterday. We had argued in the morning about something silly. He wanted to fix the fence, and I told him we could just hire someone. The last thing he said to me was, "Peridot, you spend too much money on things you don't need, and you'll regret it." I didn't know then that it was a warning. After my husband died, I was alone with Casper, who was 23. He was selling used cars at a dealership. He liked it. He said he had a talent for convincing people. The pay was okay, plus a cut of his sales. I thought he had finally found something he was good at. But 2 years later, he got fired. It turned out he had sold a car with problems that he didn't tell the buyer about. When the buyer wanted his money back, Casper tried to hide it. It was a big mess. The owner didn't want to ruin his business because of one employee. Casper said he was set up, that he wasn't guilty. And the buyer didn't know anything about cars. Then he got a job at an insurance company.
He quit after 6 months, saying the boss didn't like him.
Then he was a manager at an electronics store. He didn't stay there long either, complaining about the low pay. Then a few other places. There was always a reason why he left. The people he worked with were bad, the work was boring, there was no chance to move up. All that time, I was working and saving money. After Jasper died, I sold the house. It was too big for one person, and it was hard to be there with all the memories. I bought a small apartment in downtown Denver. I put the rest of the money in savings and stocks. By the time I retired, I had saved a good amount of money. About $1,200,000, which is good for Colorado. Not bad for a regular accountant. 3 years ago, Casper married Octavia Blackwell. She was 10 years younger than him. She was beautiful and ambitious. She worked at a bank as a loan officer, making even more money than Casper. She was smart, educated, and always knew what she wanted. I was happy at first. I thought she would be a good influence on my son and teach him to be responsible. I liked that Octavia was practical. She wasn't cold, but she clearly thought about every decision she made. When they met, Casper was working for an air conditioning company. The work was hard, but the pay was good, especially during the summer. Octavia said to me, "Mrs. Winslow, I'm going to help Casper find himself. He has potential. He just needs to use his energy in the right way." The wedding was simple. I paid for the restaurant and the music. The young couple was thankful. Octavia had picked everything out nicely, without spending too much money. Jasper would have liked that. He always said that a wedding wasn't about being fancy, but about starting a life together. After the wedding, Casper and Octavia rented an apartment near me. I visited them often, cooked dinner, and helped out around the house. Octavia worked late, and so did Casper, so I tried to make their lives easier. A mother's need to take care of her children doesn't go away, even when they're 35. But little by little, I started to see that something wasn't right in their relationship. Casper started complaining about work more often, saying he was tired of working for someone else. Octavia agreed, saying they had better ideas. They started talking about starting their own business, tossing around different ideas like an online store or a food delivery service. One rainy day in October, Casper came to me looking unusually serious. He normally came over in jeans and an old jacket. But this time he was wearing a fancy suit and had a folder in his hands with a gleam in his eyes. I was making apple pie, his favorite since he was a boy. The smell of cinnamon made the kitchen feel cozy. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, carefully hanging his jacket on the back of a chair. I was immediately worried. When Casper started a conversation like that, it usually meant he had another get-rich-quick idea. "Sit down, son. Do you want some tea?" I set a cup of hot tea in front of him and cut a slice of pie. Casper nodded, but he didn't touch the food. Instead, he opened the folder and took out some papers, charts, and pictures. "Mom, Octavia, and I have found the perfect opportunity. It's not some crazy idea. It's a serious business plan that we've looked into carefully." He spread the papers out on the table, and I saw pictures of spaces, plans, and spreadsheets with numbers. "We want to open a restaurant." I almost choked on my tea. A restaurant? Casper, who barely knew how to fry an egg, wanted to open a restaurant. But I kept quiet and decided to listen to what he had to say. "Look, Mom, it's not just a restaurant. It's a concept. Modern American food with a twist. We've studied the market in Denver. There aren't many mid-range places to eat. You either have cheap diners or expensive restaurants, and there's not much in between." Casper was talking passionately, showing me pictures of other restaurants, explaining the menu, and talking about who they were trying to attract. You could see that he had put time into researching it. It wasn't one of his usual quick ideas. "Octavia has done a financial study," he went on. "The business will make 25% profit in the first year. We're going to find a space in the Highlands neighborhood. There's a big food scene there right now. Lots of young families with good incomes." I listened and thought that my son was finally talking like an adult. No childish dreams about getting rich fast. No promises of becoming a millionaire in 6 months. Numbers, market research, a clear plan. Maybe Octavia had really taught him how to think like a businessman. "What about experience?" I asked. "Casper, you've never worked in a restaurant before. It's a really tough business." "Mom, that's why we spend so much time getting ready." He pulled out another folder. "We took courses on how to manage a restaurant. Octavia learned how to work with suppliers. Plus, we're going to hire an experienced chef and a manager. We'll handle the business side, and they'll take care of the day-to-day stuff." That sounded reasonable. I always told Casper that the most important thing in business is to know what you're good at and what you're not. If he knew he couldn't cook but could plan and get people interested, that was a step forward. Just then, Octavia called. "Mrs. Winslow, good evening. Has Casper told you about our idea yet?" I could hear the excitement in her voice. "Can I come over? I want to show you our numbers myself." Half an hour later, Octavia was in my kitchen. She had a laptop and another folder of papers. She wasn't dressed in her normal bank clothes. She was dressed more casually but still looked professional. Mrs. Winslow, I know you're worried. The restaurant business is risky, but we've taken this as seriously as possible. She opened her laptop and showed me a detailed presentation, with graphs, charts, and photos of restaurants that were successful with a similar idea. Look, we've studied 15 restaurants like this in Denver and other cities. We've looked at their menus, how they set prices, how they advertise, and figured out the best value for our customers. Octavia was talking convincingly and professionally. It was clear that she had really looked into this and knew all the details. This wasn't a childish dream about getting rich. It was a real business plan. We need $800,000 to get started, she went on. $400,000 to rent and fix up the space. $200,000 for the kitchen. $100,000 for furniture. And $100,000 for supplies and advertising. Casper added, Mom, I know it's a lot of money, but this is our chance. I'm tired of working for other people and getting paid nothing for my work. I want to build something that's mine, something I can leave to my children. His eyes lit up, and for a moment, he reminded me of Jasper when he was young, just as driven and full of hope. Jasper had wanted to have his own business too. But he always said you had to get experience and money first by working for others. Casper, what about loans? I asked. Octavia works at a bank. You could get a loan there. Octavia shook her head. Mrs. Winslow, banks don't like to lend money to restaurants. It's too risky. Too many things can go wrong. They're offering us a loan with 15% interest, but we'd have to put up property as security. That's not realistic. We wouldn't be able to make those payments in the first few months. We're not asking for a gift, Casper added quickly. We're offering you a partnership. You'd be a co-owner of the restaurant. You'd get a share of the profits. Once the business is doing well, we'll buy your share back at what it's worth. Octavia nodded. We're ready to do all the paperwork. Official partnership agreement, company documents, you'll have full access to everything. I didn't say anything thinking about their offer. On one hand, it seemed well thought out. They had clearly spent a lot of time getting ready. On the other hand, $800,000 was almost all my savings. If it failed, I'd have nothing left. Mom, I know what you're thinking, Casper said, as if he could read my mind. You're afraid I'll let you down again like I have with other things. But this is different. I've never been so serious, never prepared this much. Mrs. Winslow, Octavia added, I know you're scared. As a banker, I see a lot of businesses fail, but I also see ones that succeed. This one has a good chance if we do it right. I looked at them, at my son, who for the first time in years wasn't talking about getting rich quick, but about building a real business, and at his wife, who could manage the business well. Could this really be their chance? I need time to think about it, I said finally. This is a big decision. $800,000 is almost all my money. Of course, Mom, we understand. Take your time, but the good location might go to someone else if we wait too long. After they left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, looking through the papers. Everything seemed convincing and professional. But Jasper's voice kept repeating in my head, Peridot, don't give your son more money than you can afford to lose. I didn't sleep all night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking the same things over and over. $800,000, almost all my savings. The money I had been saving for 30 years, putting aside from every paycheck, putting into savings and buying stocks in safe companies. I got up at 5 in the morning, made strong coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a calculator. If I gave away $800,000, I'd have $400,000 left. I could live on that for 10 years at most. What if it failed? What if in 6 months, Casper came to me and said the restaurant didn't work and they had to close it? I took an old picture of Jasper out of my desk. It was from our silver wedding anniversary. He was standing next to me in his best suit, with his arm around my shoulders, smiling that small smile I love so much. Jasper, what would you do if you were me? I asked the picture quietly. I knew the answer without him saying it. Jasper had always been against giving Casper large amounts of money. A boy has to earn his own living, he used to say. If you're always helping him out, he'll never learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Every time my son asked for money, we had long talks about it. I remember Casper asking for $5,000 for a used car when he was 20. It was a nice car, almost new, and the price was fair. But Jasper said, let him save up for it or get a loan and pay it off himself. A man should be responsible for his own choices. Casper was offended and didn't talk to his father for 2 weeks. I always tried to get them to make up. I secretly gave my son the money, telling him not to tell his father. Jasper found out anyway. He saw the new car in the driveway. That's when we had our big fight. Perda, you're making him weak, my husband said. He needs to understand the value of money. He needs to learn to live with the results of his decisions. But can a mother's heart be that hard? Can you watch your child struggle and not help? Jasper didn't understand. Logic always won over emotion with him. Mothers are the opposite. After my husband died, I felt guilty every time I helped Casper with money. It felt like I was going against Jasper's memory and breaking his wishes, but how could I not? My son would come in upset, talking about his problems at work, his unfair boss, how he was being treated unfairly, and I'd give him money. Not much, 1,000 or 2, so he could find a new job. Now, it wasn't thousands, but hundreds of thousands. It was different money and different risks. I took out a notebook and started writing down the pros and cons, just like Jasper had taught me when making important decisions. Asterisk. Pros. Casper was serious about this for the first time in years. He had researched the market, made a business plan, and had his wife, who knew about finance, helping him. The restaurant business can be profitable if it's done right. They had a clear idea of who they were trying to attract and what kind of place they wanted to have. Asterisk cons. Casper had no experience in the restaurant business. It's a business with a lot of competition and risk. $800,000 was almost all my savings. If it failed, I'd have almost nothing to live on. I read the list over and over. Logically, the cons outweighed the pros. Any financial advisor would say, Mrs. Winslow, don't risk all your money on one thing, especially in a business that's so unpredictable. But logic is one thing, and a mother's feelings are another. I saw Casper change as he talked about the restaurant. He didn't have the greedy look in his eyes that he got when he talked about ways to get rich quick. It was the look of a man who had found what he was meant to do. And Octavia, I had worked with people for years. I could read their eyes, their gestures, and the way they talked. Octavia wasn't lying when she showed me her numbers. She really believed in the business. Otherwise, she wouldn't have risked her reputation as a banker. My friend Ruth called. We had been friends since high school. She's the only one who knows all my family's business. Perda, are you crazy? She said when I told her what Casper wanted. How many times has he let you down already? How much money have you already wasted on his ideas? Ruth was right. Over the past 15 years, I had given Casper about $50,000 for different ideas. None of them had made any money. Old records, breeding tropical fish, selling handmade jewelry online. They all ended the same way. But Ruth, this is different now.
He's changed, he's grown up, and Octavia is there.
She won't let him do anything stupid. Perda, you say that every time. Every time you think he's finally going to get smart, but he's still a dreamer looking for an easy way out. After talking to Ruth, I was even more confused. On one hand, my friend was right. Casper had let me down a lot. On the other hand, what if I was missing his one chance to be successful? That night, I read all the papers that Casper and Octavia had left behind again. The business plan did look professional. They had studied the competition, looked at the costs, and made a plan for how much money they would make over the next 3 years. It wasn't a sudden idea. It was well thought out. I remembered Jasper's words not long before he died. Perda, if something happens to the boy, you'll blame yourself for the rest of your life. It's better to give him a chance and lose the money than not to give him a chance and regret it. We weren't talking about money then, but about whether we should let 20-year-old Casper go snowboarding in the mountains with his friends. Jasper was worried about an accident, and I said that a young man should live life to the fullest. In the end, we let him go, and everything was fine. Maybe it's the same thing here. It's better to give your son a chance and risk the money than to say no and wonder what if for the rest of your life. On the third day after their visit, I made a decision. Not with my mind, but with my heart. I'm a mother, and it's my job too. Believe in my son, even when others don't. $800,000. Yes, that was almost all my savings. But what good is money if you can't help the person you care about the most? But I decided to add one thing, not $800,000, but $980,000, an extra $180,000, for them to start with so the restaurant didn't struggle in the first few months. If we were going to take a risk, we had to take a big one to give the business the best chance. I called Casper. Son, I'm in, but with one thing. I'm not giving you $800,000. I'm giving you $980,000. Use the extra money to get started. And one more thing. We're doing all the paperwork with a lawyer officially. No promises. There was silence for about 10 seconds. Then Casper said in an excited voice, Mom, are you serious? You're really going to help us? Yes, Casper, this is my gift to you and Octavia. It's my way of helping you build your future. But remember, this is the last time I'm giving you this kind of money. I don't have any more. Mom, I won't let you down. I swear on my father's memory, I won't let you down. The meeting at the bank was set for 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. I got there half an hour early. I wanted to think about it again to make sure I was doing the right thing. I sat in my car, looking at the bank where Octavia worked. It was just a regular office building, nothing special. But for me, it meant there was no turning back. Casper and Octavia got there right at 10. They looked serious. He was wearing that fancy suit. She was wearing a business dress. Octavia had a leather folder with papers. Casper had a bouquet of white roses. Mom, these are for you. To show you how much we appreciate you, he said, hugging me. The roses smelled fresh and full of hope. I held them to my chest, and I could almost hear Jasper saying, Peridot, flowers are nice when you buy them with your own money. But Jasper was gone, and today I had to make my own choices. The lawyer Octavia suggested was a middle-aged man with a neat beard and kind eyes. Mr. Harrison was a specialist in business law. He had worked with a few restaurants in Denver. That made me feel better. It meant he understood what we were doing. Mrs. Winslow, he said as we sat down in his office, I've looked at the papers Octavia gave me. I want to make sure you fully understand what you're agreeing to. He opened a folder and took out some papers. You are investing $980,000 in the business, Casper's Kitchen LLC, and you're getting 40% ownership. I liked the name, Casper's Kitchen. It was simple, easy to remember, and had a homey feel to it. Casper said they had a hard time choosing a name, but this one seemed the best. The 40% ownership means you'll get 40% of the profits, the lawyer went on. Casper and Octavia will split the other 60%, 30% each. They'll be running the restaurant. Octavia added, Mrs. Winslow, we've also made sure that you have the power to stop any big decisions, like changing the idea, selling equipment that costs over $10,000, or taking out loans. Your money will be safe. That sounded good. I wasn't going to try to run the restaurant myself. I didn't know anything about that. But I wanted to be able to stop anything major that I didn't agree with. One more thing, Mr. Harrison said. The agreement says how they can buy your share back. If the restaurant makes money in 3 years, Casper and Octavia can buy your share back at what it's worth, based on what someone who doesn't have anything to do with the business says it's worth. Casper leaned over to me. Mom, we don't want you to be stuck with our business forever. Once the restaurant is doing well, we'll buy your share back, and you'll get your money back, plus the profits. I nodded. It seemed fair. They get the money to get started, I get a piece of the business, and after a few years, everyone is happy. The paperwork took 2 hours. Mr. Harrison explained every part of the agreement, answered my questions, and made small changes that I asked for. Octavia wrote down all the details in her notebook. It was clear she was used to doing paperwork. When it was time to sign, I froze for a second with the pen in my hand. $980,000. The number ran through my head like a song. It was the money I had saved for 30 years, the money I had planned to live on when I got old. Mom, are you having second thoughts? Casper asked quietly. I looked at him, at Octavia, and at Thalia, who was waiting patiently. No, son, I'm not. And I signed all the papers. After the bank, we went to see the place Casper and Octavia had picked for the restaurant. It was in the Highlands, where a furniture store used to be. It had big windows, high ceilings, and a good layout. It was about 2,000 square feet, enough for 50 seats, plus the kitchen and storage. Look, Mom, Casper said excitedly, pointing to different parts of the room. The main eating area will be here. The kitchen will be here. And in this corner, we'll put a small bar for people who just want coffee or a glass of wine. Octavia took out a clipboard with a design plan. We want to create a modern American feel, like a bistro. Natural materials, wood, brick, metal, not too fancy but nice and comfortable. On the screen of her tablet, I saw beautiful pictures of the inside. With warm colors, soft lights, and comfortable furniture, the place really had potential. It was in a good location, near an office building, apartments, and a small park, with lots of people walking by and parking nearby. I started to understand why they had picked this spot. How much is the rent? I asked. $8,000 a month, Octavia said. For a place this size and location, that's a fair price. Plus, we made a deal with the owner to pay half the rent for the first 3 months while we're fixing it up. That night, we went to dinner at one of the restaurants that Casper and Octavia had been studying as competition. It was a small, cozy place with an open kitchen and reasonable prices. Casper was writing things down in his notebook, looking at the menu and paying attention to how the service was. See, Mom, they have good food, but the service is slow. And then he pointed to a table nearby. The waiter took 20 minutes to bring their order. That's too long for this kind of place. Octavia nodded, adding her thoughts on the prices and advertising. I listened to them talking about the business, and I thought they were really serious about it. It wasn't just some dream. They were thinking about it like people who had studied it. Casper, I said when we were about to leave, I want you to know that this money is all I have. I won't be able to help you again if anything goes wrong. He took my hand. Mom, I understand, and I promise you I won't waste this money. Octavia. And I will work day and night to make this restaurant successful. You'll see, in a year you'll be proud of us. Octavia added, Mrs. Winslow, this business is very important to me too. I'm quitting my good job at the bank and risking my career. We all have a reason to want it to succeed. That night I slept soundly for the first time in many days. The decision had been made. The papers had been signed. The money had been transferred. Now all I could do was wait and believe. Believe in my son, in his wife, and in their dream. I woke up at 7 in the morning with a strange feeling of lightness. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that worry about Casper's future. The decision had been made. The money had been given. Now it was up to them. I made a strong cup of coffee and sat down to plan my day. I wanted to go to the garden store to buy tulip bulbs for the spring, and then see Ruth and tell her about the meeting at the bank. Ruth would probably complain that I was being foolish, but deep down she'd understand. She has grown children too, and she knows what it's like to be a mother. At 9, the intercom rang. It was strange. Casper didn't usually come that early, and he had a key, but when I pressed the button, no one answered. I waited a few minutes and then went out to check the mailbox. Maybe the mailman had made a mistake. In the box, there was a white envelope with no address, just my name written in Casper's handwriting. That was odd. Why write a note when you could just call? I went back to my apartment and opened the envelope. Inside, there was a piece of paper folded in half. I opened it and read only 2 lines written in a hurried handwriting. Goodbye, old woman. Thanks for the money. At first, I didn't understand. I read it again and again. The words were simple, but the meaning didn't make sense. Goodbye, old woman. Who wrote that? It was definitely Casper's handwriting, but he had never called me an old woman. Even when he was angry as a child, he would say Mom or at most Mother. I sat down on the couch, holding the note with shaking hands. Thanks for the money. What did that mean? Yesterday, we had agreed to be partners in a business. What was going on? I dialed Casper's number. Long rings. Then the answering machine said, "The caller is temporarily unavailable." I tried again, the same thing. I called Octavia, but her phone didn't even ring. Just short beeps. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my head. I felt my legs get weak and I fell back onto the couch. What was happening? Why weren't they answering? What did the note mean? I tried to calm down and find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a stupid joke. Casper sometimes liked to make bad jokes. Or was Octavia playing a trick on me? But no, it wasn't funny. No one jokes about $980,000. Maybe someone else wrote the note. Maybe something had happened. They had been robbed, and the robbers had decided to mess with me. I held on to that thought. For dear life, yes, that was probably it. They would call me soon and tell me what happened, but the phones were silent. I called every 15 minutes. Still nothing. They were temporarily unavailable, as if they had turned off their phones on purpose. By noon, I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I went to their apartment, rang the bell, and knocked. No one answered. I took out the spare key Casper had given me for emergencies and went inside. The apartment was empty. Not just empty, but cleaned out. All their personal things, photos, and papers were gone. There were no clothes in the closets, no makeup or toothbrushes in the bathroom. All that was left was the furniture. It was as if no one had ever lived there. On the kitchen table, there was another note. Sorry, but there was no other way. Don't look for us. The same Casper handwriting, the same rushed writing, and not a word of explanation. I ran around the empty apartment like a trapped animal. I opened closets, drawers, and checked every corner. Maybe they had left some clue, some explanation, something. But there was nothing. They were gone, as if they had disappeared. I went home and started calling their cell phones again. Still nothing, so I called the bank where Octavia worked. The person who answered the phone said Octavia had quit her job yesterday and wasn't working there today. Yesterday? I said. But she was with me at another bank yesterday. We were doing paperwork. I'm sorry, Mrs. I can't talk about personnel matters with people outside the bank, the secretary said coldly, and hung up. So Octavia had planned to quit in advance. Even before we met at the bank, she knew she was quitting her job, but why didn't she tell me? We had talked about her working at the bank and helping run the restaurant for the first few months. By the end of the day, I finally understood that something had happened. Something very bad. People don't just disappear. They don't quit their jobs without telling anyone. They don't turn off their phones after getting a lot of money. I remembered Casper's neighbor, Mrs. Connor, an older woman who always knew everything that was going on in the building. She lived upstairs and often complained about the noise from their apartment. Maybe she had seen something. I went to see her that night. Mrs. Connor opened the door in her robe and slippers, clearly about to go to bed. "Oh, Mrs. Winslow, I was just about to call you," she said, letting me in. "Your Casper and his wife were moving out today." It was noisy early this morning. They were carrying suitcases and loading something into the car. What time was that? I asked, my heart racing. About 6 o'clock in the morning. I was wondering where they were going so early. They called a car, not their own, a big van. Casper was carrying the heavy suitcases, and that girl, his wife, was carrying the bags. And then I saw them burning something in the yard. Burning, yes, some papers. They were burning them in a metal bucket. I wanted to say it was against the rules, but then I thought it wasn't my business. So they had left early in the morning while everyone was still asleep. They only took what they needed and left everything else. And they burned some papers. Why burn papers if you're just moving out? Mrs. Connor, did they say where they were going? Oh no, all I heard him say to his wife was, "Hurry up. The plane won't wait, that's all." An airplane. So they hadn't just moved somewhere else in town. They had flown away. But where? And more importantly, why? I stayed up all night trying to figure out what was going on. Maybe they were in trouble with the law. Maybe Octavia had done something wrong at the bank, and they had to hide. But then why take money from me? Or maybe it was all a plan. Maybe. They never planned to open a restaurant. Maybe all the business plans, the numbers, the meeting with the lawyer, was all a trick to get my money. No, it couldn't be. Casper was my son. He might be reckless and irresponsible, but he wasn't a thief. He couldn't steal almost $1 million from his own mother. It was unthinkable. But there was the note on the table. The phones were silent, and the apartment was empty. The facts spoke for themselves. The next morning, I went to their apartment again, hoping I had dreamed it all. But the apartment was just as empty. This time, I looked carefully at the bucket where they had burned the papers. There were pieces left in the bucket with bits of text and numbers. One piece was bigger than the others. I could make out a few burned words, Flight 1247, and something that looked like Bangkok, Thailand. They fled the country. Suddenly, everything made a terrible kind of sense. The van, the early morning escape, the burned documents, the silence. Casper and Octavia had planned everything. The business plan, the presentation, the partnership, it was all an elaborate scheme, not just to borrow money. To steal it. For hours I sat alone in their empty apartment, staring at the ashes, trying to make sense of the pieces. How long had they been planning it? Did Casper ever love me, or was I just a bank to him in the end? The grief was unbearable. It wasn't just the money, though nearly $1 million was gone. It was the betrayal. My son, my only child. The one I had raised, protected, believed in, even when others told me not to. He called me old woman, not mom. Not even Peridot, just a stranger. The next few weeks were a blur, police reports, lawyers, frozen bank accounts. But it was too late. They were gone. Probably living in some beachfront villa, drinking wine bought with the money I spent my life saving. The investigation led nowhere. The flight had departed, no return ticket. No forwarding address, just silence. Now I live on what little is left. A small pension, my apartment, my tulip garden. People ask me how I'm doing. I tell them I'm fine. I bake my pies, tend my plants, and smile when I have to. But I never look at old photos anymore. I packed away every picture of Casper. I had to. Not because I hate him, but because remembering hurts more than forgetting, sometimes. When it's quiet, I still talk to Jasper's photo. You were right, I whisper. I made him weak. And I paid the price. And yet, I still love him. That's the curse of being a mother.